We got a doozy for you guys. This weekend, we have a huge one with Rihanna stamping her ticket to the Olympia at the Klash Series Southern USA Pro. We also had Cristobalina beating out Romina in what could be Romina's best shape ever. Is Cristobalina a real threat at this year's Olympia, taking out a major competitor in terrific shape? We have Carolina at her second show of the year getting another 7th place. What does she need to do to move up the ranks as she did prior? And we have Jacinta Nelson, who must have found the fountain of youth, winning the 50-plus Masters also at the Clash. So first off, we have Carolina getting 7th place again. And the reason that that's part of the story is Carolina is a real competitor. You know, she's a real threat. She was always in the top 3. She was always doing really, really good at shows. I've seen her compete a couple times myself, been at her shows, and she just has an amazing physique. Like, her natural lines are just so good. Her glutes are so bubbly and so round. She just has a really good physique. So what is it going to take for her to move up the ranks? This is as low as she's placed since she's been back. So I don't know why she's placing in 7th. I wanted to go into it a little bit further and see what does she really need to do to get to the next level. Now, so it has been a couple years since we've seen her. She's put some time in, some work in. But as we've talked about, the division has changed a little bit. It has gotten more muscular. The girls are getting more muscular, more dense. They're getting a little fuller. And is that the trend? And does it hurt someone who's more of the petite with the more roundness to her physique? So she's got really, really good lines, but she is very petite. She's a small girl. Now, what she has too is her natural lines are so good. She has what I call a great backstage body. I remember the first time I saw her, I was like, who's this girl? And the backstage body is something that I think is like the most ideal thing that people should have, right? That's what everyone should aspire to be. Some girls, when they get on stage, they look awesome. And they hit their poses, they look awesome. Then you see them backstage and they look totally different, right? She has a good backstage body, like the ultimate bikini body, where she's just standing there and she looks super impressive. You see a lot of girls that are like that, and you see a lot that aren't. So it's when you see someone like that, you're like, oh, her natural lines are just great. Backstage bodies, right? Crazy glutes, crazy fullness, tiny waist, good shoulders. So what does she need to do? So one of the things we need to really figure out is it how much muscle she has now? Does she need more overall muscle? And you have to eliminate everything as a possibility before you go into that, right? There's a clear, obviously, she's going to be smaller because she's more petite. But does she have enough muscle to be competitive in today's bikini world? And the question, it won't be really answered until she can nail her posing a little bit better. So a couple things with her overall posing, I think, would answer that question for us better when she's compared to more of the muscular competitors. One, I do think her legs are a little thinner. Naturally, her legs are just more petite. She's got smaller bone structure, right? She's a more petite girl. And I do think she's posing a little wide for how thin her legs naturally are. I'm not saying she doesn't have muscle. She's got a good amount of muscle on those small bones, but she does have small bones. So if you have those small, skinnier legs, like skinnier femurs, you generally don't want to pose as wide because you're going to look even wider. There's going to be more gap in between, which makes it look like more negative space, which makes your legs look a little thinner. The more farther they're out, the thinner they look. The closer together, the more meat it looks like is there. So I would thin up her posing just a little bit, bringing her legs in just a hair, maybe 2 inches on each side, bringing those legs in, not pushing maybe as hard. But in terms of her overall glute fullness and her roundness of her hamstring, it looks pretty good to me. Her lines look good. Her waistline looks crazy. Her V-taper looks good. Her shoulders look really nice and developed. They're really rounded. So I would first start with that, starting with closing off her posing a little bit. And then also in her front pose too. You're seeing a lot of ribs in her front pose here, and you're seeing a good amount of the vacuuming going on in that upper rib cage. She doesn't need to vacuum. She's already so small and so petite. I don't see how that's going to help her to make her waistline even smaller. She's already going to have one of the smallest waistlines on stage. So she doesn't need to make it even crazier, you know? So I think that if she got rid of this vacuum, and you could see she's kind of just leaning back a little bit in her pose, just a little bit too upright, and that also changes her overall lines. It shrinks her up because if her shoulders are back like this on that front line versus just a tiny bit forward, the closer your shoulders are going to be to someone, obviously the bigger they're going to look. If I put my shoulders forward, they get bigger. If I put them back, they get smaller, right? So she's leaning up, being really tall, which is what you're supposed to do, but maybe just a little bit too much, where it's actually shrinking her shoulders up by pushing them back too far and then causing even more vacuuming and then causing more rib exposure. You know, you see these ribs here popping out. That happens when you're going to be up really, really tall. And if you're already a skinnier, more thinner competitor, I shouldn't say skinnier, that's a bad word, a thinner competitor or more petite competitor, you don't want to be giving the appearance of being skinny. And the difference of looking skinny and looking lean is going to be all those ribs showing and how you're posing and whatnot. So you see someone who's already lean and already petite, and then you start showing ribs and you posing them like that, they're going to look a little skinny. They're going to look a little bit stringy. And I don't think she is by any means. I don't think she's stringy. I just think how her posing is making her look is going to be the difference. So does she need more muscle to be competitive in today's bikini world? Maybe. I would like to eliminate first these things, see if it helps at all. And maybe she's already figured that out. Maybe this is the final conclusion of all the other different posing she's done. My eye specifically says this. That's what I would try first. And then I'd go from there and then see if now with that posing, do you look more along the lines of everyone else? You're going to be smaller. You're more petite. That's just the way it is. You could look at some of these more petite competitors still do really well. Rihanna's another example. She's more petite. She's got a lot of muscle for a petite girl. Ashley's more petite, got a lot of muscle. Janet, more petite. Issa, more petite, right? There's a lot of successful petite competitors, even today, that are doing pretty good. But I want to eliminate this first before we go into, okay, she just needs more muscle. Because right now I'll say she looks like she needs more muscle, but I don't know if it's because of her presentation or because she actually does. And now moving on to Jacinta Nelson. Hopefully I'm saying your name right, Jacinta. So Jacinta here won the Masters division of the Klash here at 50 plus years old. Okay, so I want to give some love to the Masters. You know, I love training Masters. I got a lot of Masters clients myself. One of my favorite things to do. Having Masters clients, if you're a coach, is honestly an awesome thing. They're doing it for the love of the sport. They really enjoy it. It's a different energy, and I just love working with Masters competitors. But that being said, if I were to show you these pictures and I said this girl's 50 plus, I have no idea how old she is. She could be 55, she could be 60. I don't know. It's 50 plus. And I said, this girl's over 50. She found the fountain of youth and she's selling it for $100 a vial, right? And it's just, you drink this fountain of youth water and you're going to look like her when you're 55 or whatever she is. I think that some people would actually believe me and buy it. I think if you were walking down the street, you saw her and said, oh, hey, you showed her ID, and you're like, hey, she's whatever, 55. Buy this liquid, drink it, and it's from the fountain of youth. $100 a vial, $1,000 a vial. Would you buy it? Like, if you weren't in the sport and you're just a regular person, how many people would actually believe that? I would say a good percentage. I would say out of 100 people, I would say probably like 30, 40 people would actually believe it, right? I would. So anyway, let's go into her crazy lines. This is pure craziness. Look at these tie-ins. Now, if we go back, and I did a video the other day, if you guys want to see it, I'll put the link in the description, about the Angelica era, the first year she won the Olympia, and her tie-ins. These are very close to that look, right? So we're talking she's 50 plus and has an advanced physique closer to like an Olympia level winner of, I think it was 2017, if I was right on that, 2018, of Angelica's look. I mean, that is pure craziness to having tie-ins and fullness, no skin issues, roundness to the hamstrings, a great core. I mean, fullness to the shoulders, great posing. I mean, she is a really, really good competitor. And I don't think Masters get enough love on this channel. So at these Masters Pro shows, I'm going to start throwing them in here once in a while, because I think a lot of women, when they're competing, and I see it a lot of times on the vlogs and stuff like that, they think, oh, I'm 40 and I have no, I don't have a chance. And I'm like, no, there's a lot of women doing really well at 40 plus years old. I mean, Jessica is one of them. Aaron Stern's one of them. And there's a lot of girls winning pro open shows at 40 plus years old. And I think people don't realize what you can do at a certain age. And a lot of times people just want to use that as an excuse, but no excuses here from Jacinta. That's for sure. So congratulations to you, Jacinta. I hope to be seeing you again on one of these bikini reviews. Now let's get into the battle of second and third place, which I feel is more of the story than Rihanna winning, actually. Because we're looking here at Romina, who, again, was a top 10 Olympia competitor. So this is a top 10 girl, top 10 in the world at one point. And Romina keeps in really, really great shape. She's done shows with 2 weeks notice before. Romina keeps in great shape all year. Hats off to her. I love when people do that. So first off, Romina, great job being a good role model in the sport. A lot of girls, they're blowing up in the off season, putting on 25, 30 pounds in the off season, but you're a good example of you can do this all year. You can stay in shape. You can do a show with short notice. She jumps into big shows like last minute sometimes. So always in shape. And I think that's a great job. Now, here's the thing, and why I think this is such a story, is that Romina got third in this show with a perfect score. Krista Bellina got second with a perfect score. I will say, this is one of those scorecards that I'm not a fan of, that it went 3, 6, 9, 12, 15. I think it went all the way down to top 7 was perfect places, perfect scores. It might have been just top 6. I know for sure it got to at least top 6. And, you know, when it's this close, I still find it very difficult to believe that every judge thought the same thing without any influence from the head judge. But whatever. It is what it is. Now, looking at Romina, here's the thing. Romina, this might be her best shape I've seen all year. That's why it's such a story. This is really, really good shape. This looks a lot like how she looked at the Arnold. She's, you know, looking really, really good. So when she's getting beat looking this good, that's where it becomes like, whoa, you know, was it her posing? That's the thing. I didn't see her posing. You know, you could be off on your posing, off on your presentation. I can't see that in pictures, so that could be the thing. Someone as experienced as her, who is as fluid as her, I would doubt it. You know, if it was someone else that has maybe a little trouble getting back on stage and losing that confidence because they need to get warmed up a few times, that'd be one thing, but not with Romina. So this one I looked at really closely, and I'm like, okay, why is she beating her? What is it that's beating her? Because this comes down to, do you like the pretty muscle, right? Romina has that very pretty flow. She has that pretty muscle. Nothing's too crazy, too dry. Or do you like that more dense muscle, that harder, that fuller, more dense muscle? And that's really the difference between the two. And you could see the density right when you look at just looking at the core here, and you're looking at the hardness of the oblique lines and the hardness of the muscle itself. Christobalina has a harder, more dense look to her. You look at the shoulders, and looking closely at the shoulders, Romina has a nice, round, soft, pretty muscle. Christobalina has that harder, more grooved in, etched tie-in here on that shoulder. So look at that separation line where that shoulder ties into the tricep. It is really, really hard here, right? If you look at Romina's, it's not very hard. It's still soft. It doesn't have that deep groove. But Christobalina, when you have that deep groove, even way up here, and this is a good way to identify it, is right up here on this insert up here. Romina doesn't have that, right? So the conditioning level is harder, more dense. She has more muscle, fuller muscle. I'm not a huge fan of Christobalina's posing with her hand here. It's really high up on her stomach. It's covering her belly button. I think it could be a lot better with that. But other than that, her posing is pretty good. It's just her hand placement, I guess I should say, on that. Now, really, really good competitor. Are they going to be going with more dense muscle in future against Romina? Is this going to be a set precedence where she's going to beat her based on her density and fullness? Now, it's really strange because of the winner of the show looks more like Romina than she does like Christobalina. That's where it gets a little weird, because you have the winner of the show with pretty full muscle, right, versus second place who has dense, hard, rounder, fuller muscles, and then you have third place again being pretty full muscle again. So it's a weird variance on if you're going to go with one thing, usually you would go with two. I would understand more if Christobalina won the show, Rihanna got second, and Romina got third. I'd be like, okay, they went with more density. But then when she gets second and Romina gets third, it kind of is weird, right? It's like, okay, what are you going for? Are you going for that pretty muscle? Or are you going for the dense muscle? Because Romina is really, really good. And she's not like, you know, someone that you can get walked all over. Like, she's a really good competitor. She's going to win. If Romina enters 10 shows, she's probably going to win 5 of them in a year. Like, she's that good. So it's a weird transition going from that first place to the second place to the third place based on the body types that they're picking. So this one, a little strange to me on figuring that out. So you're probably saying, okay, well, Bikini's won from the back. Maybe that's where it was. But when you look at the back, it's basically the exact same scenario of density and hardness versus pretty muscle, roundness, and fullness again. So it's a tricky one. And honestly, from the back, so from the glutes, it's really difficult to pick a winner here. It would be pretty difficult. If I just took the lower body of both of them and looked at just their glutes, the only difference you're really going to see is going to be the density that Christobalina has and the hardness that Christobalina has as the difference. The shape is very similar on both of them. The roundness of the upper outer edge of the glute is about the same. I mean, everything looks very similar. The one thing I will say is I'm not a fan of how hard Christobalina is posing. She's squatting a little bit in her pose, and I think it's just a little bit too much of a knee bend. I don't think that's a good look on a bikini competitor on stage. And also her hamstrings are starting to get that detail and that graininess and separation, but it's right at the limit for her. It's not too much. But if you look at Romina and how round and how pretty her hamstrings are, they're round and full without any separation. You can really see the difference of hardness of what I'm talking about in terms of the hamstrings. But I will say her hamstrings are not overly detailed and overly separated, but they are getting close to it. Another few days of dieting would start being too much. The tie-in is full. It is close to being etched. I would call that a pretty close to etched tie-in, versus Romina's is full but not etched. And you can see just a deep groove here of that glute tie-in and what I'm talking about versus the softness of this tie-in here. There's still a little bit of body fat, still a little bit of softness to it, versus here there's almost none. The other thing too is, so one, I don't like the posing on the back with the knee being bent. The other thing is the hair is actually on top of the glutes and sitting on the glutes. So not a good look. If you notice, Romina's waistline looks smaller because she's showing her lower back here than Christabelina's. So girls, keep your hair right about here. Show a little bit of that lower back. It's going to make your waistline look smaller. It's going to make your glutes look more projected and more make them look larger because there's less hair kind of blocking the lower back. So your lower back is farther away from your glutes. So your glutes naturally will look bigger. Remember earlier I talked about my shoulders. The farther forward they are, the bigger they're going to look. Well, if I put a wall of hair in front of the glutes are going to look not as far from the back, right? And so they're not going to look as projected, as big. So it's a kind of an illusion. They look a little bit bigger, a little bit rounder, and your waistline looks a little bit smaller because now that you're arched, your back is about this far away from the edge of your glutes, and versus the hair, your back's only going to be about this far away from the edge of your glutes. So it just doesn't look as big. So nice little tip there for you guys. But as far as the V-taper goes, this picture is slightly at an angle, so it's hard to see the full V-taper. So I want to be honest about this. And I can't see I see Romina winning here in the V-taper, but I'm not seeing a good V-taper from her. But also her hair is really hiding her V-taper. It's on top of her shoulders. And honestly, it's on top of both of their shoulders. They both made that error. Take your time, girls. Get your hair, put it down your back. If you have to adjust it, adjust it. It's okay. Take that time. Make sure that you're showing your pretty shoulders that you've worked so hard for, and it's going to help with your overall V-taper. And if you look at this side and you look at her V-taper and shoulder capping versus this side, and if you were to just take those on two separate pictures, it really does hurt her a little bit on the left. But I won't say that that's the reason, because Christabelina is doing it on both sides as well and covering her lower back. So if anything, if I had to edge anyone out here, I would actually have Romina winning, especially based on the winner, Rihanna winning. I would have Romina in second, not in third in this scenario. Now let's go ahead and get into the winner, Rihanna. So we've been talking a lot about Rihanna. She's been really coming in strong this year. She started off with some big shows. She went into the New York Pro. And I knew that for sure that this year that she was going to be winning a show. There's zero doubt she's going to be winning a show. Honestly, looking at Rihanna, I think that she is going to be a top 10 physique this year at the Olympia. Will she get as high as a top 5? I don't know. If she continues with her growth the way it has been, I think that she can be. So she just looks great. Her lines are just so naturally good. Like her structure, it's just a natural genetic structure that's always been there. Remember, a couple years ago, she was doing really good when she didn't have this much muscle. She was killing it, and she just didn't even have even nearly this much muscle. Now she's filled out her frame, and she's coming in hard, and she's looking really, really good. But the structure is the thing that we talk about. And that's another thing we've talked about before with Lauren Dannenmiller, right? Structurally, one of the best structures in bikini. She was doing really well, got top 10 of the Olympia with still not filling out her frame and having all the muscle she needed to do well. Imagine Lauren Dannenmiller filling out her frame. I mean, we're talking top 5 the Olympia, maybe even winning an Olympia. We don't know how good she could be because that structure was there. This is the same situation, right? This is Rihanna now coming back with as much muscle as she needs. So hopefully we'll see Lauren Dannenmiller come back with as much muscle as her beautiful frame will allow. And that puts her into the top 5, top 3 at the Olympia. I think that's very realistic for her, and I hope to see her there. But this is kind of the living example of what we were looking for and hoping for with the Lauren, right? Rihanna has filled out her frame. She's back, and how good is Rihanna now? We don't know. We don't know yet how good she is. I think top 10 at the Olympia is very realistic. I would be surprised if it was less than top 15 if she shows up like this. I mean, how many girls can beat her structurally? Probably in the world, maybe I can think of 1 or 2 that can beat her structurally that I've seen in terms of structure. In terms of muscle, right now, there's still a good amount that can. Right now, are they going to want that muscle? That's the thing. Are they going to want that density come Olympia time? We don't have a lot of information right now on that, on how they're going to go. The only information we have on that is Amy right now. We have Amy being the densest, most muscular bikini competitor to ever have this much success. But is that an Amy specific thing, or is that the industry direction, right? We don't know that for sure until this year's Olympia, right? Based on everything, but she's been competing a lot, so it looks like it's going to be the direction, but it is one competitor, right? But then Rihanna wins this when Krista technically fits more of the Amy structure and Amy density than Rihanna, definitely more than Romina, right? So when we're looking at Rihanna, is she going to be, are they going to go with this pretty soft muscle at a show like the Olympia? Are they going to go in the direction of Amy with the density? It's hard to say. Now, I will say Amy beat Rihanna just the week prior, right, at the New York Pro. So based on the scenario currently, they're going to be going more density when it's at least those two. But with her beating Krista and Krista making a strong argument for winning, I do think that her lines are speaking for themselves here. Maybe they are going to go with more of that pretty bikini muscle. Rihanna has what you petite girls, right? The petite girls are like, man, we're getting dwarfed this year. We're going to get sized out. They're wanting girls with bigger structures like Laura Lee and Jennifer's and Amy's. And girls with more muscle, more density like Amy. And so we're seeing this, right? But is that what's actually going to be happening? Or is that just because she was competing a lot and winning a lot of shows and it's just a her specific thing? Time will tell. We don't know that for sure, which direction it's going to go. What I will say is Rihanna has those petite bikini lines, has the pretty muscle, has the roundness and fullness to her glutes, to her full body, has a tiny waistline. Look at these beautiful shoulder width, the great high lat, the tiny waistline that's not etched, right? She still has that soft bikini muscle, right? Now, you could even argue, and some could even argue, that there's still a tiny bit of body fat for her to lose on her glutes here, but I think it's great just like that. It obviously worked for her. There's going to be some judges that could say, oh, you could be a tiny bit tighter. I think this is as tight as bikini should get, personally. I think that if we're talking about someone looking like a fitness model, right, we're out of the question of being beach models now. Beach model's not a thing, right? The way that bikini was presented was, oh, it's just some girl who just walked on the beach that day who also goes to the gym. That's out of the question. Let's just call that reality dead, right? That died in 2000, probably 15, 16. We now are full-on fitness model bikini bodybuilders, right? Okay, taking that into account, I think that this is a good limit for the sport. I think that she represents what bikini should be as an evolved bikini, not as the bikini beach model, but as the bikini fitness model bodybuilder that it is today. I think she fits that. The conditioning is still obtainable. The muscle's obtainable. It's not crazy unrealistic. It's hard. Very few people will ever look like this. But that's what the sport should be. There still should be a challenge to it, not just any girl that you see who kind of works out and does yoga should be able to step on stage. I do think there should be some happy balance to that, right? So with that being said, I'm a big fan of it. I'm a big fan of her look. I think that it's a good direction for the sport to go in, and it's a good direction for the petite girls to see. So I'm very happy with the decision with this one. Could have went a bunch of different ways. She's going to be doing a lot of shows. It looks like she's on the Nevada State roster as well. So that's going to be another throwdown we have this weekend. It's going to be a good one. Seeing some big names on that one that I'll be reviewing. There's actually 3 shows next weekend, so it's going to be a lot to go on the next week. But congratulations, Rihanna. I am very, very happy for you. Long time coming for you, so I'm excited to see you at the Olympia this year. You should have been there a couple times already. But that's what I got for you guys. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. TeamElitePhysique.com for worldwide online contest prep with me. Talk to you guys later.